Did a show where he just came out on stage and he didn't say anything, and everybody got quiet, and he just waited, and everybody started laughing. So I won't do that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Strauch, the Dean of the College of Art and Design here at Lesley University. Lesley has changed significantly since its beginning as a school that trained elementary school teachers, while teacher education remains a central component of Lesley's mission. Courses and programs in the arts are now embedded in each of the 4 colleges at Lesley. In addition to innovative programs in art and design, like user experience and visual effects, Lesley offers the leading programs in the country in expressive therapies in art, music, dance, drama, and creative writing, a nationally ranked graduate program in creative writing, and broad, dynamic partnerships in community arts and engagement. This long sustained commitment to the freedom of expression through arts integration and innovative education makes Lesley University, in my opinion, the creativity university. Further evidence of this contention is the Strauch Mosse Visiting Artist Lecture Series, presented each fall and spring beginning in 2008. This event is made possible by the generosity of Lesley trustee Hans Strauch and the Mosse Foundation. This endowed lecture series enables the university to bring world-renowned and award-winning artists to campus in support of Lesley's commitment to artistic and cultural inquiry and to help advance the university's mission of social justice in all its many forms of expression. Past speakers include mixed media artist Zhu Bing and Suzanne Lacey, poet and playwright Derek Wolcott, jazz musician and apartheid activist Hugh Masekela, performance and installation artists Ann Hamilton and Nick Cave, dancer, choreographers Judith Jameson and Twyla Tharp, graphic artist Lou Bilikova, author Edwidge Danticat, and photographer Latoya Ruby Frazier, just to mention some. So I'd like to take this moment and please join me in thanking Hans Strauch for his generosity and foresight in establishing this significant series of talks that allows our community to hear from some of the most accomplished artists of our time. I'm pleased to announce that the fall 2008 Strauch Mosse Visiting Artist Lecture will be delivered by Colson Whitehead, the recipient of a MacArthur Fellowship and author of The Underground Railroad, for which he won the 2016 National Book Award for Fiction and the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. That event will be October 30th. On behalf of Lesley University students, faculty, staff, alums, and our wide community of friends, we are delighted to welcome award-winning actor and songwriter Christopher Jackson to deliver this visiting artist lecture. It is now my pleasure to introduce student Nicole Mello, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Nicole is a senior majoring in creative writing and American history. She is also a member of the Lesley Performing Arts Club and performed in the show Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street this past weekend. Following tonight's talk, at 8:30, I invite you to a reception right upstairs just above us in the Washburn Lounge to meet and talk with Chris Jackson. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the evening. Nicole.
Emmy award-winning songwriter, composer, and actor, and the original George Washington in the Tony and Grammy award-winning Broadway musical Hamilton. Chris Jackson is currently the star of the hit CBS drama Bull. His story is powerful and motivational. In his presentations, he shares his remarkable journey from a small town in Illinois, population 3,000, to performing for a constantly packed house on Broadway. From school plays to off-Broadway productions to starring as George Washington in the revolutionary, critically acclaimed musical Hamilton. I think we've all heard of it. Of course. Jackson reveals the lessons learned along the way and the mantras, moments, and mentors that made a difference. I actually had the good fortune of seeing him in Hamilton in New York in July of 2016. Since I'm a history major, I heard about it pretty early on. Me and my friend Sarah, who's sitting over there, we got tickets before it blew up, and let me just say it was pretty awesome. Well worth the hype, and this history major approved, so it's fine. Taking audiences behind the scenes of Broadway's biggest hit, sharing everything from befriending Lin-Manuel Miranda back in 2002 to performing for President Barack Obama, Jackson also reflects on the social impact of Hamilton, addressing issues of inclusion and race. A talk as riveting as it is thought-provoking, Jackson leaves audiences inspired and empowered, and maybe with a song or two stuck in their head. Jackson is also a powerful advocate for social inclusion and activism, the arts, and autism. After his son was diagnosed with autism in 2007, he became a vocal and passionate supporter of Autism Speaks, Culture City, and Sesame Street's autism outreach program. In his speech, The Power of Kindness, he talks about his own family's struggle with more questions than answers. In this moving and informative talk, Jackson shares the challenges and opportunities that come with working with children on the spectrum. He opens up about the beautiful struggle of raising his own son, as well as ways to create acceptance and inclusion for all people with unique abilities. Please welcome Christopher Jackson.
Mentioned Hamilton, and I heard a little squeal coming from over there. I was like, oh, there's two in the room. We're good. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and hang out with you guys. Dean Zoff, that was an amazing bowl of clam chowder. Now I'm already interrupted because I was told right before we came out that the podium moves. So if I put any of y'all to sleep, I can just pick this up and it's a heck of a cordless microphone. I already love Lesley University. This is my first time being here. And I'm honored to share this time with you as a visiting artist. Just as a show of hands, we got some Heights people back here too. Hey! How many actors do we have in the room tonight? Oh wow! Yeah, okay, I'm not alone. I'm really not alone. I'm almost comfortable now. Almost. But any opportunity that I have to share time with a room full of artists and artists adjacent and people who are supportive of those of us crazy enough to pursue this. It's always time with kindred spirits, and I'm always very appreciative. When I considered the topics that I wanted to cover, I kept coming back to the word community and another important word, relationships. I'm thinking a lot about the relationships that we build along the way in the creative process. I can think back to my high school speech team teacher, Lynn Stevenson, who knew that I sang in church and in the school choir and in my small hometown of Cairo, Illinois. And somehow, as teachers always seem to do, they see more than just what's on the surface. She handed me a copy of The Crucible. Typical light reading for a 15-year-old high school. Well, let's just say she must have seen some uncharted depths, and her belief in me launched me on this incredible journey. I think focusing on community and relationships right now has a definite resonance, given where we are as a country and a society, when everything feels so fractured and we're all spending way too much time trying to defend our positions and articulate why the other person's position is wrong. It's creating psychic barriers in so many aspects of our lives. But for artists and journalists and creative people, creative-minded people in all sectors, community is all we got. Another reason that I'm thinking a lot about community and relationships is that out of the past year or so of turmoil, I've realized that I needed to channel some of that energy into a positive direction that reconnects me to my purpose. I'm constantly struggling and working to be connected to that sense of purpose, that same sense of purpose that I felt when I was 15 years old and I was doing a dramatic interpretation of The Crucible in the final scene with Emily and Danforth and that evil guy, and she was so brave, and John, who was like a sap and trying to be brave. I needed to channel some of that energy, and these days I'm seeing so many of my fellow actors and writers and musicians almost splitting their time half-nap between their artistic pursuits and their activism. It's like the acting or the playing or the working in the arts in some capacity is turned into their side hustle. They shoot an episode and then they look for somewhere to go march or hand out flyers and feel connected to that community. And that's a wonderful thing, and that it signals a desire to be a part of the community, and feel culture around you in the midst of all this crazy. And it's like the 2016 election cycle, which was really, really good for Hamilton. It is shaking us artists to the core. And we're creating, and we're trying to heal something that maybe we didn't know was broken. Or maybe we weren't aware that it was broken. And realizing that we can't just stand on a stage somewhere and say, my only responsibility is to make somebody laugh or make them cry and then go home. Because to me, that means you're not choosing to create an authentic connection between your work and the price that someone paid for a ticket. And that's certainly why I've started writing my very first script. After reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scripts, I have to try to do something different, something new, something that I've never tried before, and yet am called into telling a story that I've never seen told before. And it took our president being elected, and it took seeing the videos every day of the social unrest and police brutality, and it took seeing the courage of the Me Too movement to feel empowered, to remind myself that I am empowered simply by saying I'm empowered and I'm going to write. Because you've got to do something. You've got to do something. And so my message to you boils down to the power of choice and choosing to be authentic in your career pursuits and in the decisions you make about your life. I'm happy to use my career as an example because I've learned some powerful lessons along the way, especially about this thing that some people refer to as success. Hashtag seeing your face in a thick book. You know, some people sometimes look at a TV credit or statues or trophies, as my son likes to call them, or nominations, and they think, man, he's got it made. And they think there comes this magical point where actors get all comfy and have the option to read scripts and choose which one they're going to do. But the reality is that only happens to about 30 or 40 people in our business. Like, I don't mean just like an act in stage. I mean stage, TV, film, the world. There's only a few people that get to be like, nah, that one, not that one. That one's good. Needs a bigger part now. No one does that. The answer to that is almost certainly yes, because you know you got to eat. But after a while, you realize that if you stick with it long enough, who you are dictates what kind of work you do get, and what work is attracted by your previous work. The time that you spend in the business cultivating relationships and investing in what you know and the other artists that you interact with also affects what opportunities are available to you. But rarely does it ever get to the point where you can just sit back and say, yes, yes, no, no, maybe, yes, okay. It comes down to whether or not you want to work. Hashtag eat. If you're smart, you place a lot more value and a lot more emphasis on developing relationships. Directors of galleries, directors of plays and films. You may be working in a Starbucks with one of those people. And then 10 years later, if you've stuck with it, and if one of those people is directing a Broadway show, and you're now ready to, be a lead in the Broadway show, because you've developed a relationship that spans a decade, you've seen each other's work, you've supported each other's work as professionals, as artists, as just human beings, you find yourself in a community that now feeds itself. So in that sense, instead of you becoming so fabulously famous that you get to pick and choose, you morph into this centered, holistic space where the work chooses you. And for me, that's how Hamilton came along. I met Lynn, Miranda, and Tommy Kail, and they're just for the rest of the evening will be Lynn and Tommy, or those guys. I met them in 2002 after I'd been performing in Lion King on Broadway for 4.5 years. Lion King was my first show. Simba was the first thing there. Thank you. While I was performing in that show, doing 8 shows a week, 50 weeks out of the year, I in 4.5 years, had 3 knee surgeries, a couple of really bad breakups, survived 9/11. Life happened, right? Life happened. But I met them in the basement of the Drama Bookshop through a friend. Tommy had just opened up a small theater company to basically stage readings and develop work. He and Lynn had hooked up and met, and they were working together. And a friend of mine came across them in an audition and said, well, they were developing In the Heights. There's this really fascinating, fun play. You got to meet these guys. They're doing really fun stuff. And so I met them, and they gave me, we clicked, and they gave me a script and said, show up, we're going to be doing this reading in 10 days. And I was like, sure. But little did I know that they would become like 2 of my brothers in a very, very short amount of time. And it wasn't because I had been on Broadway and they hadn't. It wasn't because Tommy was Audrey McDonald's, personal assistant. It wasn't because Lynn's dad was the mayor of Washington Heights, unofficially. It wasn't because of any of those things. It was because we were people, and they were doing the thing. And I wanted to be a part of that. So with no money and no prospects, I was like, oh, in this world where buildings are falling down and lives are being completely destroyed, how about we meet up in a basement and make something beautiful? And now it's on your shirt. And that's crazy to me. And it might sound a little surprising for someone to say, yeah, my first Broadway show, I was on Broadway at 21 years old. I was in the biggest show at the time. I was in the biggest show that had ever hit a Broadway stage, and I still hadn't figured out what I wanted, right? I worked for Walt Disney Theatrical for 4.5 years. My first lead, all of the knee surgeries, all of the things that I went through, I was not happy. I mean, if we're talking about the real, I thought more would have come out of me being in my first Broadway lead. And being young and 23, 24, and young dude running with his shirt off, and I was in shape, I mean, I thought I was moving into some things. But Hollywood did not call. 8 months passed, nothing had really come of it. I was disillusioned after I left, and for a long time, I was focused on what was happening or not happening in the business of things, that I had forgot to cultivate the relational aspect of the business. And so when I say, I met Lynn and Tommy, they didn't have money to offer me, they didn't have a show that was written or ready to go, but again, they were making the thing, they were building In the Heights, and I had developed this skill set, and I was an avid fan of hip hop, and they were doing all the things I loved, but I couldn't pay my rent. Because when you're young, you don't save money when you have a really good job. It's true, don't do what I did. I had the most fun sitting in a room doing that first reading of In the Heights than I had ever had doing anything. And it was quite clear that Lynn was immensely talented and Tommy was smarter than anybody I'd ever met, and what they were doing was so different than anything I'd ever seen. But more than just the gig, it was the hang. It was being around kindred spirits. It was about being around other artists, because they were at different points in their lives. They were like, we're making the art, we're pursuing this, and we'll figure out where it leads, but we don't know where it leads right now. And I was all about, how much money can I make? Because I can't pay my bills, and how can I stay afloat? And you fast forward through that process, which is about 5 years worth of development, and I got married, and I met my wife doing, a reading, another In the Heights reading, who she was playing my Nina, and then, I chased her and wouldn't leave her alone, and eventually, she decided to have pity on me. But it was the pursuing and sort of getting back in touch with that thing that made me fall in love with doing theater. And it rekindled my desire to eat, cans of beans and tuna for dinner, just so that I could save that $1.50 and get back on the train and go to that next rehearsal. And from there, I learned how to work. I learned how to be on time. I learned how to respect my fellow actors. I learned how to be a leader. I learned how to be a sounding board for my fellow actors. I learned how to be depended on, like when Tommy or Lynn needed me to come through in various ways in the theater. And in the process of developing Benny, I fell in line with who it is that they saw. I came to understand who that person was supposed to be. In essence, I grew up. And as an artist, I think we're always pursuing the moment where we can fully realize and capitalize on the entirety of our experience. So all of that personal development happened in the midst of being with these guys and in that time of our lives. And the personal development ultimately is what's fueling me now as I try to make sense, just like you, of the artist's role as a citizen and as a performer. When my high school speech teacher handed me that play, she didn't know it, but she was handing me a challenge to use my creative energies in a way that resonates, that reverberates. She was handing me a tool to express myself in a way that transcended my daily life. It saved my life. And it allowed me to be my authentic self, to discover my authentic self, and then realize that in the midst of whatever chaos my life might offer me, and Lord knows it has offered me plenty. But that's what I want you all to remember. It's not about some magical star turn. You have to get out there and grind. You have to pursue it. It's the same thing that I was speaking earlier about how, Washington, Hamilton, Burr, Jefferson. These men taught themselves Latin from a page. It's the conditioning of the desire that allows you to exceed beyond any barriers that you might encounter. And when you make those connections and when you invest in your relationships, don't ever forget that making art is about connecting to the world. Identifying the thing that allows you to have access to your emotional core, and then find the means by which you can connect with others. No matter how crazy the world may seem around you or the person next to you, someone is always going to need that word. Someone is always going to need to see color in a world where they only saw black and white. Someone is going to need to hear a sound that they never heard before. And all of those things rest in you and in your heart and in your desire to connect. Find out what motivates you. Find out what motivates your soul. And find the clearest pathway from that point to sharing that with the rest of the world. You may find yourself on a wall in a gallery, or in front of a class full of hungry minds, or distracted minds. You might find yourself on a stage. You might find yourself just in the gaze of a fellow actor on stage who just needs you there for that moment that could completely reshape every aspect of their experience. And it's why I'm standing here tonight. It's that desire to find a deeper and a meaning and a more colorful meaning and a more resonant existence as we move through this space. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for allowing me to share those thoughts with you, and thank you for having me here. And I look forward to talking and engaging now. We get to exchange with one another. It's not a very sexy ending, but I promise you, the conversation is just beginning. Home with me. I'm only joking. Let's talk. going to pick the podium up in a second. Please.
I guess I use this.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrea Lyman. I'm also an actor. I wondered, because you were talking about what it was like working with your friends, people who became your friends in Hamilton. So then what is it like to go from that, not only friends, but also people of color, to a whole different environment in Hollywood, working in Bull, where you're like one of the only people of color working in this show? Is that like a big culture shock?
No. And this is why. When you're in a room full of people, you're in a room full of people. And what I found is that our work is very, very, very specific and very focused. And it's in the margins, it's in the time between takes where the connection really happens. Which is probably the only redeeming thing that I have to say about television right now, because it takes so long to make. The theater, you show up, you do your warm-up, you do the show, and people have a time, and it's a thing.
And it's live all the time.
And then you hang on stage for an hour afterwards, and then you go home, and it's quiet.
Yeah.
Television takes 14 hours a day to make.
I know.
You know, it takes 3 hours to shoot a 30-second scene,
I
at
know.
least. But to answer your question more specifically, because you're in a studio most of the time, everybody's checking their phones. The news flash comes over, it's a conversation. Then you come back the next day and the same thing happens. It's a different scene, but it's the same conversation. So it allows you actually a little more time to really delve into other people and connect with, fellow actors. The crew, when the actors are busy and they're shooting, the crew is kind of off to the sides. And then when we go away, that's when the majority of the people on the set are crew guys and gals. And they're all like about their business, and it's sort of like all of this work is being done. But the context of our show isn't really dealing with that yet. With the larger aspects of like our society, it's more of like episodic, procedural, this is happening this week, this is the case. I'm, gently saying, hey, we need to, we have a very unique opportunity to talk about the things that folks are talking about right now. But Hollywood does have its way, and it moves slow, but I'm not cynical. I tend to believe that, every half a step that's made is a step in the right direction. And so I will constantly push and constantly prod, and just by being there, I give myself a platform to continue to do that. None of my friends can go to our head writer and say, hey, what about this case? What about what about jury nullification? What about this case? What about bringing in, why don't we have more black defendants? Why are we not telling more of those stories? There's all kinds of lines to like navigate, but as long as you keep poking, as long as you keep asking the questions, you get closer to actually getting to explore it. And at the end of the day, we're selling, diapers and tires. That's what TV is for. But you can still, have an impact. So it's my hope that we get to continue to move in that direction.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you. So. Everybody clap. Come on, he's down. Come on down. I was going to say that. Hi.
How's it going?
What's up?
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm a graduate student of the music therapy program, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about your experience as an artist. I did my undergrad just in music proper, with having an autistic child and kind of that whole thing, being an artist behind that and stuff, because that's obviously a lot of what we work with. So it's kind of a new direction, I guess.
My son, I have a 13-year-old son who is on the autism spectrum, and he is amazing, and he's incredibly musical, and we discovered about 3 years ago that he's perfect pitch.
See, now I'm jealous.
Which is a blessing and a curse. I'm going to tell you, it's a really interesting story. We found this out. We were in the car. It was around rush hour, drive time radio.
Yeah.
And when you have these mix shows, sometimes DJs will now, it's much easier, they can slow a song down and lower the key by like half a tone. And it was a Demi Lovato song, and my son loved Demi Lovato. And he was like, Mommy, that's wrong. Mommy, can you fix it? Can you fix it? Because it's my wife is a recording artist as well. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with that song. What is he talking about? And she was like, wait a second. It's slower. I was like, no, it's not. You're out of your mind. She turns it to the next station, and the same song is playing. Of course. And he was like, well, that's better. From the time that he was diagnosed till about 2 or 3 years ago, anytime we were at a birthday party, the happy birthday drove him nuts. What happens when a group sings happy birthday? awful notes are sung. Happy birthday song. But it was sensory overload for him, and he would literally thrash on the floor. He could not deal with it. When I was a child, my mother would have the piano tuned, and I had to leave the house. It would send me into hysterics. As a teenager, I had to leave, and I couldn't express it. It just made me crazy. But CJ's a very, very musical child. We have not been able to implement musical therapy into his services because it's just not his thing. He doesn't enjoy it. It's something that's really difficult. As a parent, I deal with the same sort of slings and arrows that every parent that has to go work deals with and can't be with their child all the time, which is really all I care about. And being in the theater is a Faustian, bargain that I have to strike every day because I love what I do. To the point where it checks a lot of boxes off for me, for me to find my sanity. And at the same time, I miss everything. So, CJ's early days in therapy, he got diagnosed 5 minutes before the first run through of In the Heights in rehearsal. We hadn't even opened yet. So CJ was the first Heights baby. So sort of the learning process for me was stunted because new dad I had never heard of autism before our diagnosis. So I had to catch up quick. And of course, my wife put her career on hold, pretty much stopped it. To be at home for therapy 4 hours, 5 hours a day, doctor's appointments, pediatric, appointments, all of those things. So as an artist, what I do doesn't bring a lot of solace to my son, but because I'm able to do what I do, it brings a lot of help in other ways.
Right, understanding.
Yeah, certainly a lot of understanding. I mean, we are a very expressive family. And we're very, very open to him expressing himself however he has to, or his younger sister, who has her own difficulties having a big brother that she adores but can't talk to because he only says certain things and she talks too much, and it's like, so it's like yin and yang are trying to find the way. But I would say that as an artist, our process has been aided in that we are already very open. We are already very desperate to reach a level of understanding of what he goes through on a daily basis, and also to be in tune with other families that are experiencing the same thing, and to appreciate people who are like you, who are setting your entire career path to helping those who need to find their voice. That's just, man, you have me crying up here. But it really is. It's profound. Yeah. It's profound. I shudder. I have other friends who are not actors who have kids on the spectrum and are trying to sort of figure it out and trying to have the same kind of access that we practice on a regular basis, and it's much more difficult. Yeah. But for other reasons, you know what I'm saying? So it's been a challenge, but it's the best thing that's ever happened to any of us. Yeah. Quite honest.
Thank you so much.
Man, thank you. Everybody's coming up. That's you.
Hi. I'm Samantha. I'm actually a physical therapy student. I've never done acting or anything, so I just am here to learn stuff.
Okay.
But I have a question about your role about George Washington.
Okay.
So I was really lucky enough to see the show, and even in our society, he comes off as this very flawless person, this leader, which he was. I mean, he wasn't flawless, but he was a leader.
Mm-hmm.
But he owned slaves. He helped start the French and Indian War. Like, he did these sometimes these not great things, and I was wondering, did you think about that when developing your character, and like, what was the process like with thinking about those things?
So, very good question. Tommy and Lynn approached me in 2010 in very different, actually 2009. We were in the middle of a Heights performance, and there was a moment where Benny and Usnavi, our two characters, would be in the bodega and while the Salon song was going on, No Me Diga, right? And so right before we go out and perform our next big number, Lynn's like, I got my next thing. And I was like, great, what is it? He's like, it's about the Treasury Secretary. Okay, I was like, what? Later in the show, he's like, Alexander Hamilton. I'm like, don't tell nobody. I was like, I think you're good. So fast forward about another week, Kale's walking through the theater, and he walks up to me and says, G-Dubs. I was like, what? Everything is shorthand, by the way. I said, what? He said, George Washington. You're going to play George Washington. Great. Yeah. Awesome. Went out that night because, do you guys remember when there were Borders, bookstores? I have to ask, isn't that sad? It's my thing. I went to Borders. I got Turnow's biography on Washington, and within the intro, we're deep in the slavery conversation, and I was like, how's this going to work? Because you get asked to do really, really crazy things, and if it weren't for Lynn and Tommy, Broadway still would not know what to do with me. I am too light to be dark, and I am too dark to be light, and everybody has been absolutely confused by how to cast me. It's tragic, and that's the only reason why it's worth laughing at. But he made me George Washington, and I had to figure this out. And I contended with that question for, the 6 years that it took to get it to the stage. That is the one aspect of the role that I have no handle on, other than the obvious. Repugnant that the man thought he could own people, right. Just like any of these other people. And I remember asking the question very early on. I said, are we really going to deal with this? He said, in 250 years, nobody in this country has ever been able to deal with it in a 2-hour play. It's not happening that way. It's not going to come that way. Nobody's going to get let off the hook that easy. So they were deft in the way that they dealt with it. And in my mind, because we are, as actors, we're telling stories, the research of it. When I went to Mount Vernon, the first place I went to was not his house. It wasn't that beautiful vista, in the portico in the back. I went to the slave quarters. Because that's what I'm tied to. That's where my experience begins. And I felt it necessary to honor those who never had a name, never had a story told about them. I needed to be there, and every aspect of my performance involved them as well. Because Hamilton does a very interesting thing. We modernize a lot of old sort of axioms, right? We modernize the telling of this story, and that gives us access to it as people in this time, and then the rest of it we experience together. The day that Lynn handed me One Last Time was the day after the South Carolina church shooting. And so when I get to everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree and no one shall make them afraid, that's what I'm singing about. It's not that he facilitated that, but the idea is still pure, right? That's Micah 4:4. That was in the Bible. These guys weren't living by that ethos. That wasn't what the fruit of their vine produced, right? Yeah. And so, it was always difficult to navigate for me. But there were moments in every single performance that allowed me to honor that. At the very end of the show, when when Washington comes forward behind Eliza and he says, she tells my story, I speak out against slavery is the next line, and Washington bows in shame. It's a very subtle thing. It's not everything in that show is meant to, beat you over the head, but that moment is very real, and it exists in a very real place. And that moment, after the second performance of that show, it was that moment that saved my mind, because I was grappling with it so hard. And Tommy said, there it is for you. Will that be enough? And it was, because it allowed me to honor the spirits that were in that slave quarters that I went to visit. And subsequently I visited 4 times since. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm short. Okay. I'm Yael. I'm a student at Northeastern University, and I'm also from Illinois originally. So I feel Chicago area.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah. Suburbs, if I'm being for real. So my question is, what is it like to originate 2 roles in 2 such revolutionary musicals? So first of all, did you know that they were going to be as big as they were from your very first reading or your very first experience with them? And then what is it like to go through that entire process and experience such like national and international recognition?
It's a very good question. Originating a role is the only way to go, and because no one's done it before. So you don't have to live up to anybody else's expectations. Because believe me, joining a show that's already up and running is quite literally like jumping on a moving train. Everyone around you knows where they're going, and you don't. And you don't rehearse with other people on stage. You get a chair and a stage manager and a dance captain, and that's it. So yes, being able to originate a role means that from day one, if you were told to go stand on 6, you can stand on 6 and know that that's where you're supposed to be, and not guess. Because there's nothing more daunting than guessing at something in front of 2,000 people. So that's the answer to your first question. Second question, Heights was successful, but it wasn't as beloved as it is now. Because y'all have got to own it. Everybody's got to live with it for a long time, right? It's my favorite show. From a heart perspective, I love it more than Hamilton, because my life changed doing that show, as I talked about earlier. Like, I grew up, Heights was like my college experience. It was like grad school for me in life, because it afforded me the opportunity to like open my eyes and truly wake up. As far as Hamilton was concerned, nobody knew Hamilton was going to be what it was. That was a cosmic event because so many things were happening. Nobody knew we were going to get that guy running against Hillary. Nobody knew Hillary was going to do this. Nobody knew what the election cycle was going to be and how heated it became. Nobody knew any of that. The fact that so much of what was happening on the nightly news was being depicted in a story that mimicked something that happened, 250 years ago. We're not doing it any different. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think all of those things conspired to, the fact that he performed the song at the White House, and everyone kind of laughed. And the next thing you know, 52 songs later, and the president shows up at our 7th preview. We hadn't even had a full week on Broadway. No, that never happens. That never happens. So that kind of drove a lot of what was happening, what was going on too. But no one knew. No one knew. It could have been that.
Yeah.
I still, I love talking about it because I didn't talk about it a lot when I was doing it. You know what I mean? So the experience, I'm sort of experiencing it in a different way on this side of things because we missed it. You blinked and it was over. It was a year and a half on Broadway and it was done. And you kind of look around and you're like, everybody, Lynn's on a rocket ship going somewhere. David's on 15 different movies and shows. Anthony's on this. Renee's killing zombies and Netflix and Lesley's at the Super. I sat and watched Lesley at the Super Bowl this year, sing God Bless America. Like, where are we? Like he had a baby. Like crazy things happen, right? And it's been that. And. That's the 92 Dream Team. That never happens again. Not like that. Not like that. but it's fun to talk about.
It's fun to hear as well.
What's that?
It's fun to hear as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi. My name is Mia, and I have my master's from Lesley from 2 years ago in elementary ed, and my undergraduate degree is in theater from Holy Cross with an emphasis on directing.
Okay, now you're bragging.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. The reason why I'm saying it like that is because I'm curious what was the best piece of advice you ever got from any director?
I don't know if there's one.
I'll take more than one, that's all right.
Tommy's the best director I ever worked with or for. And it's never just one thing. It's always his ability to code switch, right? His ability to talk to 15 different people in a room, not because of the work, but because he's connected, right? He's like a fantastic, like a baseball manager. He puts the right people in place and then lets them do what they do, right? He's cast 2 shows that I thought I should have been in, and he didn't cast me in them, and he was right, and I was wrong, but he still should have cast me. But I think a good director knows how to put the room together, right? Like, I've never seen him cast someone because they were so immensely talented but were a lunatic off the stage, and there's lots of that happening. People are trying to find their way in a lot of different ways. There's never a person in the room that you have to be like, why'd they get hired? Because they can sing really well, or they're a brilliant actor in interpreting dialogue, but I can't trust them because they're crazy. Right?
Yeah.
And most directors don't pay attention to that. They'll go after the name, or they'll go after, the convenience of a moment, and it creates chaos for the other actors. So it's not so much a particular thing that I've been told as much as it is just the innate awareness that when I walk into a room that he's running, I can put everything down and I can go about the work. Because I think ultimately that's what you need to give. That's your main job as a director. That's what you need to provide for your actors. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Y'all are so out bad right now. Woman. Hey.
Hello, my name's Lizzie. I do not go to college. And my question is, what was your favorite song from In the Heights in Hamilton and why?
Okay, When You're Home from In the Heights / When the Sun Goes Down. They're kind of right there. And One Last Time, which was originally One Last Ride, which was this whole thing. It was crazy. I have a recording of it, but I used to have to like pinch myself right before the end of the song, because there were several times, I'm thinking maybe 4 times in the run, where the last thing I sang was One Last Ride, because who changes a song to have to change the word that actually sounds the same? And I always felt like Lynn did that to confuse me and choke me every time it happened, and it did happen. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Camila, and I was wondering how you first got into acting.
I was 3 years old. My grandparents had bought me a Mickey Mouse guitar, a little plastic Mickey Mouse guitar, and told me that I could sing at church if I wanted to. And so I sat down and I sang Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and people clapped, and so I sang it again. True story, there's an 8mm film somewhere in Godparents' garage. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'll get to all of it.
I'm Avery,
Hi, Avery.
and I'm 11, and I love acting.
And my question is, if you had to give any advice to a young actor, what would it be?
Good job. Good job.
It would be continue to be brave like you are right now.
Yeah.
That's a good start. Are you nervous? A little nervous? All right, I'm going to tell you a secret, right? The line between excitement and nervous/fear is super, super thin. You know what the thing that erases that line is practice. Right? Don't ever stop working hard. Right? Because you're 11 years old, and I'm glad that you found something that you love. So love it back by doing it. And all of the things that you're feeling right now, they change. Right? You still get the butterflies, but it doesn't stop you. Right? And your body does what you want it to do, as opposed to like kind of catching you off guard sometimes. Right? You're 11. God bless you. Work hard. Read a lot. A lot of reading. Never met a stupid actor. Met stupid actors. Never met a talented artist who wasn't well read. So read a lot. That was so awesome. You made my night. You did. That's awesome.
Hi, my name is Anastasia and I'm a sophomore in high school.
Hi.
And so my theater is currently doing In the Woods.
Into the Woods, yeah?
Yep. And my friends and I spent about a good 3 hours today studying all of Hamilton and in Heights.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, my question is, how and when did you know that you wanted to be an actor?
I grew up in I had a tricky upbringing in that my dad was not around, and I loved my family. My family was amazing, because my family's crazy like every other family. But nothing made me feel like I mattered more than when I was able to stand in front of people and open my mouth and find the notes and find the vibration and connect to my God and feel secure. Not because people were clapping, but simply because I could express all of the pent-up frustration and find all of the words that I couldn't find when I thought it mattered the most. So when I stood up with a mic in my hand or stood up and heard that music and I was able to sing, or I was able to go to speech tournaments and interact with other kids who loved doing what I did, like it helped me find out who I was. And it de-stressed me, and it allowed me to feel confident in a world where I did not feel very confident. You know, I was, I think, really around your age when it happened. Being a teenager is tricky. You know a little something about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's hard, you know, and any outlet that you can find that's positive, that builds you up, that gives you more than it takes from you, is one that is worth pursuing. And so if that is in the Hamilton and Heights sing-along that you have, well, that's a lot of songs. If that's what brings you joy, and if that's what, you know, fills you up and makes you feel a little more whole, go on and do that. But if you're doing Into the Woods, you got a lot of time to decide to choose. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Linda Lee, and I'm an alum of Lesley. And I'm a principal in the Boston Public Schools in a K-8 school.
Okay.
And in my 5 years as a principal, I'm very passionate about providing opportunities for students that live in the city, the same opportunities that kids in the suburbs have. So in my 5 years, we have developed a theater arts program that we're really, really proud of, and I so wish with all my heart that my kids could be here tonight to hear you. But knowing that not everyone makes it to Broadway and to the theater or to the movies or TV, there are many other things, great things that come out of, being involved in the theater. And I wondered if you could just speak to that for a moment. But before you do, can I just make one other comment? Yeah. I absolutely loved the episode of Bull when you sang.
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Do that again.
There are, for every actor that's on a stage, there are generally about 10 people that are facilitating that actor being up there. It's even more so in television. The amount of effort that goes into building every piece of clothing or buying in a store far, far away and bringing it, and collecting all that stuff. Hair and makeup. A lot of hair. Wardrobe, lighting, sound. People that drive the trucks. There are about 350 people that work on Bull every single day. I don't work every day because I'm not I'm number, what they call on the sheet, there's a list of the characters, their importance to the show. I'm number 6 out of 6. Which means in the fall it gives me a little extra time to play golf when I can. But there are jobs for everyone. There's so many different ways to work in our profession, be it theater, be it film, be it television. That's why I always recommend for any young student that is interested in pursuing some form of the arts, that they be exposed to not just the show, but after the show. That they not meet just the actor, but that they meet the stage manager, and that they meet a producer. How many incredible, entrepreneurial minds that are in a single classroom that could go on to work on Wall Street or be in finance or open up their own business. But there's also, production is a very important aspect of our business as well. There's so many different streams of opportunity. They just have to be exposed to it. I think if a kid grows up and says, hey, I want to be a costume designer, they're pursuing that. Because at any given point, they can pick up a piece of cloth and some needle and thread and do what they do, right? So it's sort of the same thing as me picking up my little Mickey Mouse guitar. Like, I found it. Even when I didn't know what it was. I thought it was going to be a baseball glove and not a microphone, but it's not, So that's, I always see educators making a difference in so many different ways. And if you've got kids that are interested in theater or theater arts, it's theater arts for a reason, because there's just so many different avenues for them to go down, and so many opportunities in that regard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.